Hey YouTube, MC Games here, and I have a question. Do you think these graphics look good? Now, as you can see, this is a video game. Now, if you've never seen a video game before, you would say, well, you can tell that is a man on a four-wheeler, and that is a man, and there he is in the desert. But if you have played video games recently, you would see that this is rubbish. So YouTube, as I was saying, that game was from 2001. That was 14 years ago. Now it is 2015. Have we reached a peak in video game graphics, or can it get better? Or, for that matter, can video games evolve any more technologically? Dictionary.com defines a video game as any of various interactive games played using a specialized electronic gaming device or a computer or mobile device, and a television or other display screen, along with the means to control graphic images. So anyways, the first popular game was Pong, which was the first, well, I guess, just a financially successful game, being that there was games before it, but Pong was the first one to introduce the world to games, and was the first successful arcade game, and also influenced a company named Atari, who are, well, pretty famous, being that they really made home consoles popular, which is what I'm going to talk about now. This here is the Magnavox Odyssey. It is the first video game console of all time. It was a failure, but its games were simple and worked on plastic overlays, as you can see here. It was primitive for the time, but is the first generation of consoles, and that is why it's important. Now this here is the Atari 2600. It is the leading console in the second generation, but not the only one. It had many competitors such as the Intellivision and the Magnavox Odyssey 2, but it was outstanding over the others because it was made by Atari, who were the leading people in the arcade business, so all your favorite arcade games could come home, and you could play them at home, for example, Pac-Man and Space Invaders. But it also crashed the industry with a bunch of bad games and a lack of game standards that developers had to follow. But it is very, very important in the history of video games. Now, the third generation of game consoles was a very interesting one. It saw the rise of a Japanese company called Nintendo, and this here is the NES. As you can see, it is like very cool. You put your games in there, and right here I have the most famous one, Mario Brothers. Well, the most famous one is Mario Brothers and Duck Hunt, which I have over there, but I don't feel like getting. And what you would do, just take it, put it in, and then you would play. And this thing was revolutionary for the time with 8-bit graphics, and it was just great. Well, anyways, this generation also saw the fall of Atari when they tried to make a comeback with the 7800, but it failed to this because this had all the best games like Mario and all that. And yeah, it had the third party support, and it was great. Next up is the fourth generation. The fourth generation was very interesting with the rise of the console wars between Nintendo and Sega. Now, I sadly do not have a Super Nintendo, so this is my Sega Genesis Mark I. I actually have 3 Sega Genesises. Over here is my Sega Genesis Mark II with NBA Jam. Anyways, it was kind of like a big thing to be 16-bit back then. Like, as you can see right on the console right there, it says 16-bit. Now this had a bunch of great games with Sonic and all that, but one thing that I personally think is very, very influential about the Sega Genesis is what the games came in. Now usually with the Super Nintendo you would get your games in a cardboard box, and then you would take the game out. But like, for example, here is Triple Play on the Sega Genesis. So you would get this, and you'd open it up. There you go, instructions, and then you go game. It's kind of what modern games, like Xbox One from the PlayStation 2 came from. And without them, we may still be getting our games out of cardboard boxes. And I think it's just very good for that reason. Now, the 5th generation of video games was really interesting because it showed the rise of another Japanese company, Sony. And they made the PlayStation. Yes, Nintendo also had their N64, which was, like, superior to the PlayStation, but the PlayStation was a little, like, better in a few ways. The N64 was only better because it had 64-bit graphics, but the PlayStation had 32-bit, and it ran on CDs, and the N64 ran on cartridges, which gave this a major advantage with the amount of space it could hold. And this really put Sony into the forefront of the games industry. And with this lead, they really crushed their opponents. Nintendo was hanging in there in 2nd place, but in 3rd place was Sega, and they could not stay in with it because they had the Saturn, which had a lack of a Sonic game, and that was Sega's mascot. So a console without its mascot is likely to fail. But the PlayStation had many mascots, like for example Crash Bandicoot, which was probably the most well known, but they had a great array of games, with games for kids and games for adults, like Metal Gear Solid and the Gran Turismo series, one of my personal favorites, with being like the most realistic racing game of all time. I think that the PlayStation was like the winner of the 5th generation, being what it did. Next is the 6th generation, and the 6th generation showed the rise of many consoles, like the Xbox, but the PlayStation 2, which is what is right here, this is a PlayStation 2 Slim actually, but it was a major success, being to date the best-selling game console of all time, and well, it knocked out Sega out of the business when they released their Dreamcast. Sony just blew them out of the park, and that's why it is revolutionary in its own mind. At the beginning of the video, the gameplay I showed was from that, and that's what this is right here. That's the game I was playing. And it has really good graphics for, well, from when it was the highest tech there was, and it can go online and play games online and stuff like that. USB slots, you can't really see them, but they're there. And look at this thing. It has the game in there. This thing's really small. It's the smallest game console I know of that's not a portable system. And that's why I think it keeps its place as probably, for a long time, the best-selling gaming console of all time. This is the PlayStation 3. This is the 7th generation of video game consoles. Well, the one made by PlayStation. I also have the Xbox 360 and the Wii. Now, the PlayStation 3 used a Blu-ray system, and the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox were both had HD. So, well, HDMI. And they were really good graphics. But they can only be matched by the next generation, which is the PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and Wii U. I actually happen to have a Wii U, it's right there, but I will show you guys the course of the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One. Well anyways, this is the 8th and current generation of video game consoles. This is the PlayStation 4, and it has the best looking games that we have seen yet. For example, The Last of Us Remastered, which I have an image of right there, is, well, it is like it's actual real life. And the PlayStation 4 is, for example, like real life. And I don't think that graphics can get really any better. If they do, then I'd like to see them. But probably back in the 90s with 16-bit Sega and Mario, Sonic and Mario, they probably thought the graphics wouldn't get any better. So I wonder where graphics will go from, like, here. How will they get better? what will be the next way to play games? Instead of going on Steam and pressing play game, will we be like playing our games in our minds? And at this moment in time, like this generation of games, more people have games than ever with mobile devices. Like everybody I know who has an iPhone or something like that has at least one game, like Flappy Birds or something like that. I mean, wait, no, what is it called? Flappy Bird or Angry Birds? Yeah, Angry Birds. And like someone has something like that, and they can carry that around wherever they go. But what will be done next? For example, the Oculus Rift has, well, like virtual reality, and virtual reality is like the future, I guess. And like when you look at a game from the 90s and a game from now, seeing that was 20 years ago, and then you put it into put that into a different perspective. Like, look at a timeline of movies. Like, put a timeline of show a movie from the 50s and show a movie from the 70s, and then you see a big difference. That is why I think that video games are the fastest growing industry and will keep growing at a rapid state. Who knows where they'll be next? Will movies be video games? You decide what the main character does? I don't know. That's up for you guys to decide. So, please comment, like, and subscribe. MC Undergames out.